The laughter was the worst part. Not the interruption. Vera Hutchins had been interrupted before, had built a whole architecture of coping around it, had learned to let the interruption pass through her without showing where it landed. Not the eye roll. She had stopped seeing those after year 7, the way you stop seeing a crack in a wall you walk past every day. It was the laughter. When Vera Hutchins, 63 years old, retired hospital administrator from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, gave her answer to Steve Harvey's question on the Family Feud stage on August 6, 2024. And when the board lit up with her answer at number 1, her husband Kenneth laughed. Not with her. At her. The specific laugh of a man who has just been proved wrong and cannot metabolize that information directly. So he turns it into a performance of superiority and aims it at the person who proved him wrong in front of 208 people on national television, loudly enough that the boom mic didn't have to work for it. Steve Harvey heard it from 9 feet away. He turned toward Kenneth Hutchins with the expression of a man who has been waiting his entire career for the exact right moment to say the exact right thing. And then he said it. 5 words. Into the microphone, without raising his voice, and the room went so quiet so fast that the audio engineer later said the silence itself showed up on the waveform. It was a Tuesday, August 6, 2024, Stage 29, CBS Television City, Los Angeles. Vera Hutchins had spent 29 years as a hospital administrator, not a nurse, not a doctor. The person who made it possible for nurses and doctors to do their jobs, who managed the budgets and the staffing and the compliance and the 3 a.m. calls when something in the system broke and someone needed to know how to fix it before morning. She had retired 14 months ago. She had not entirely found, in those 14 months, what to do with the part of herself that had been running at that frequency for 3 decades. Her daughter Pamela, 38, had suggested the Family Feud audition as something to do together, something bright and outside the house. Vera had agreed. Kenneth had said he was coming too. Vera had said fine. Their son-in-law David and their grandson Micah, 15, completed the family row. The opposing family, the Ose Mensahs from Phoenix, were warm and voluble on their side of the stage. A multi-generational family whose grandmother, Afia, 74, had been doing a small celebratory shimmy every time her team answered correctly since the warm-up, which the audience had adopted as a kind of collective response. Nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. What nobody on that production crew could have seen from the pre-interviews, what the casting coordinators had not found and the legal releases did not ask about, was that Vera Hutchins had spent the last 18 months of her marriage in a particular kind of quiet that was different from the quiet before it. She had always been quiet in the way that competent people are quiet, contained, efficient, saying what was necessary and not more. But this quiet was the kind that follows a decision that hasn't been spoken yet. She had been sitting with a question since February of 2023, when she had retired and found herself alone in the house with Kenneth for the first time in 29 years, without the structure of work to organize the space between them. And the question was, is this what it actually is, without the scaffolding? The scaffolding had been the job. The job had been the reason she left early and came home late and had calls on weekends and had things that needed her full attention that were not the marriage. The marriage had been running underneath the job for 29 years, the way a river runs under ice, present, moving, shaped by forces she had mostly not stopped to examine. Because stopping to examine things requires time, and the job had consumed time with a thoroughness that had, she now understood, served a function she had not consciously assigned it. The insurance piece had arrived 18 months into retirement, which was when the insurance piece always arrived, quietly, with paperwork. Vera had enrolled in her own individual coverage after leaving the hospital system's group plan. The plan she had selected covered mental health services at parity with medical coverage, which was what the plan materials said. What the plan materials did not say was that the parity requirement would be interpreted through a prior authorization process that required her therapist to submit a detailed treatment justification every 8 sessions. The first justification, submitted in April 2024, had come back approved. The second, submitted in October 2024, had come back pending additional documentation of medical necessity. Her therapist had submitted the additional documentation. The response, documentation reviewed, authorization not supported under current clinical threshold parameters, had arrived 3 weeks before the Family Feud taping. Vera had paid out of pocket for the 2 sessions since then. She had not told Kenneth she was in therapy. She had told her daughter Pamela in June, because Pamela had asked a direct question, and Vera had decided she was done not answering direct questions from people who loved her. Pamela had said, "Mom, how long have you been carrying this?" Vera had said, "A while." Pamela had said, "I'm right here. You know that." Vera had said, "I know. I'm learning to use that better." The first round had been easy, in the way first rounds are easy when one person is performing and the other is playing. Vera was playing. She answered 3 questions in the first 4, each answer precise and landed, the product of a mind that had spent 3 decades processing complex information under pressure and producing clear outputs. Kenneth answered 1 question and got it wrong and laughed it off the way he laughed things off, which was loudly and at the expense of whatever was nearest to hand. Steve Harvey had watched them through the first round the way he watched all his families, with a fraction of his attention that was always running underneath the game, reading the room for what was actually in it. The second round, question 2. Steve asked, "Name something a wife does that her husband never notices." Vera stepped to the microphone without hesitating. She said, "Keeps the whole house running while he thinks it runs itself." The board lit. Number 1 answer. 58 points. The audience erupted. Steve Harvey pointed at the board with both hands, grinning the grin of a man who has just heard the most correct answer of the afternoon. He turned to Vera to acknowledge it. And Kenneth Hutchins laughed. Not a surprised laugh. Not a caught-off-guard laugh. A deliberate laugh. A laugh that said, "Listen to her. Listen to this. Can you believe?" Aimed at the audience. Aimed at the room. Aimed at his wife's correct answer like a thing that needed to be reduced before it got too large. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Steve Harvey stopped smiling. He turned to Kenneth. He said, "Not one more word, sir." The studio fell completely silent. It was not a long sentence. It was not a complicated one. It had 5 words and a period, and the full weight of a man who has used his platform in this specific way enough times to know exactly what he is doing when he uses it this way, and exactly what it costs, and exactly why it is worth the cost every single time. He said it without anger. He said it the way a man says a thing when he is completely certain it is the right thing to say and completely uninterested in softening it. Kenneth Hutchins blinked. He looked at the audience. He looked at Steve. He said, "I was just." Steve said, "I heard what you were just. Now I'm telling you what comes next." The studio fell completely silent a second time, and then it wasn't silent. The audience came up from their seats the way they had come up before, in the particular upward motion that happens when a room has been holding something that needed to be released, and the sound of 208 people releasing it at once filled the stage from the floor up. Vera Hutchins stood at the podium. She did not look at Kenneth. She looked at Steve Harvey, And Steve Harvey looked back at her with the focused attention of a man who has decided that whatever else happens in this taping, this woman is going to be seen correctly before she leaves this building. He said, "Come here." He said it to Vera, not to the game, not to the podium. He walked to center stage, and he waited, and Vera walked to meet him. And he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded. He said, "How long has your work been invisible to him?" Vera looked at him for a long moment. She said, 29 years. She said it the way a person says a number. When they have done the math so many times, it has become simply the answer, no longer carrying the weight of calculation, just the weight of fact. The studio fell completely silent. Pamela, in the family row, had her hand over her mouth. David had his arm around her. Micah, 15, was sitting very still in the way that 15-year-olds sit still when they are learning something about the adults around them that they will carry for the rest of their lives. Steve wasn't done. He said, "I want to tell you something about what you just said. 29 years of work that someone stood next to and called invisible." He paused. "I know what it is to do the work that nobody sees. I know what it is to be the one holding everything together while the world walks past. I was at a gas station 30 years ago with nothing, no address, no money, no name that meant anything to anyone, and an old man looked at me and said, 'God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' I didn't know what the plan was. I know now. The plan was this stage, this moment, being in a position to stop the room for the people the room hasn't stopped for yet." He looked at Vera. "This room is stopping for you. 29 years late. But it's stopping." Vera Hutchins pressed her lips together. She breathed through her nose once, controlled and careful. She said, "I just wanted someone to notice." And then Steve Harvey did something that made the crew not okay, that made the audience not okay, that made Harold, the floor director, step off his mark for the second time in his 22-year career. He said, "I noticed. The whole board noticed. 58 points worth of noticed. And I need you to write that down somewhere and look at it every day, because that is the true number, not whatever number he's been giving you." Vera looked at the board. The number was still there. 58, number one answer. She nodded once. She said, "Okay." Steve wasn't done. He called for the phone. He told Vera he wanted to bring in someone who had seen her work up close, not family, not someone managing the same silence, but someone who had watched her do the job and knew exactly what it was worth. He asked her, outside this room, who had seen her most clearly, for longest? Vera thought. Then she said a name. Bernadette Coles, her deputy administrator at the hospital for 11 years. The person who had sat 2 doors down from Vera's office and had handled the overnight calls when Vera was unavailable, and had watched Vera build a department from a deficit to a surplus over 8 years, and had told her, at Vera's retirement lunch in front of 43 colleagues, "This hospital works because of you, and most people in it will never know that, and I need to say it out loud before you leave." Vera had cried at the retirement lunch. It was the first time in 29 years she had cried at work, and she had done it at the last possible moment, which felt correct. Bernadette Coles, 56, was in her office in Baton Rouge when the call came in. She was in a budget meeting. She excused herself when she saw the unfamiliar number, because Bernadette Coles was the kind of person who excused herself from budget meetings for unfamiliar numbers in case they were important. When Steve Harvey explained who he was and why he was calling, there was a pause of 5 seconds, And then Bernadette said, in the voice of a woman who has been waiting for the world to catch up to something she has known for 11 years, "Put her on." I have been waiting to say something to Vera Hutchins in a room big enough to hold it. Steve held the phone to Vera. Bernadette said, "Vera, I am watching from my office on my phone, and I need you to hear me say this where people can hear it. You ran the most complex department in that hospital for 29 years, and you made it look so easy that half the board thought it ran itself. It did not run itself. It ran because of you. Because of your brain, and your patience, and your 3 a.m. calls, and your absolute refusal to let anything fall apart on your watch. That was not invisible work. That was the most visible work in the building. It just needed a room big enough to say so." Vera said, "Bernie." Bernadette said, I know. But I'm saying it anyway." The camera on position 1 stayed on Vera's face for 14 seconds. Nobody called a cut. Steve wasn't done. He looked at Micah, 15, in the family row. He said, "You've been watching this whole time." Micah nodded. Steve said, "What did you see?" Micah thought about it with the seriousness that 15-year-olds apply to questions when an adult they respect asks them directly and waits for the real answer. He said, "I saw my grandma answer a question that was about her and not know it yet. And then I saw her know it." Steve looked at him for a moment. He said, "Hold on to that. What you just described is what it looks like when someone finally gets seen. You'll know how to do that for someone else now, because you watched it happen." He paused. "That's a thing I'm giving you. On purpose. Keep it." He turned to Kenneth. He said, "I'm going to give you something too. It's not comfortable." He said it without hostility, without theater, the way a man says a hard thing when he has decided the other person needs to hear it more than he needs to avoid saying it. "You have been in the same house as the most visible, invisible person I have ever met, and you laughed at her tonight. In front of your family. In front of this room." He stopped. "That laugh is information. About you. Not about her. The question you have to answer is whether you're going to keep being the man who laughs, or whether you're going to become something else." He looked at Pamela, then back at Kenneth. "Your daughter is watching. Your grandson is watching. Your wife is standing right there. You have everything you need to make a different decision. The decision is yours." Kenneth Hutchins did not speak for a long moment. He looked at Vera. Whatever was moving across his face was not nothing. It was not enough yet. But it was not nothing. The Osei Mensah family had not moved. Afia, 74, who had been doing a small shimmy every time her family scored correctly, was still. She was looking at Vera at center stage with the expression of a woman who has been 63 years old herself, who has stood in the particular location that Vera was standing in, who did not need anyone to explain to her what she was watching. When the prizes were announced and the taping came to its close, Afia crossed the stage and stood in front of Vera and took both of Vera's hands in both of hers and said, in Twi and then in English, "We see you. We have always seen you." Vera looked at her. She said, "Thank you." Afia patted her hands twice and said, "Now you see yourself too." That's the important part. Both families received their prizes. The production team quietly arranged a separate car for Vera and Pamela from the studio to the hotel at Pamela's request, which the production coordinator granted without requiring an explanation because the day had made the explanation unnecessary. The clip, 12 minutes and 33 seconds, posted without edits, reached 62 million views in 19 hours. By the end of the week, it was at 195 million. By the end of August 2024, it had been seen 370 million times across all platforms, shared in 68 countries, translated into 24 languages. The hashtag #NotOwnMoreWordsSir trended in 44 countries for 9 consecutive days and was adopted by 4 national workplace equity organizations as a phrase for their fall campaigns. The Hospital Administrators Association of America issued a statement citing the clip and Vera's 58-point answer specifically, noting that hospital administration, a field that was 73% female and chronically under-recognized in public discourse, had never been described more accurately in a mainstream media context. The statement was shared by the organization's 34,000 members. In September 2024, Steve Harvey's foundation launched the Quiet Work Foundation, named for the category of labor that Vera had named at the podium, the work that keeps everything running while someone else thinks it runs itself. In its first year, the foundation funded professional recognition programs for workers in caregiving adjacent administrative roles, partnered with 21 hospital systems to establish formal recognition infrastructure for non-clinical staff, and provided therapy access and insurance appeal support for 17,000 individuals, specifically targeting the prior authorization loop that had trapped Vera, the one where parity language in plan materials was undermined by clinical threshold parameters in the authorization process. By mid-2025, the foundation had helped draft model insurance regulations in 6 states, closing the gap between stated parity coverage and authorization practice. Bernadette Coles retired in December 2024. At her own retirement lunch, 41 colleagues, the same room where Vera had cried 6 years earlier, the new department head showed the family Feud clip. Bernadette watched it from her seat at the head of the table. At the end, she said, "That's what Vera Hutchins built, and I've been trying to run it worthy of her ever since." Nobody in the room was entirely okay after that, which meant the lunch was exactly right. Kenneth Hutchins completed a 16-week program in the fall of 2024. He went because Pamela told him, plainly, over the phone, in September, that she was asking him to go, and she needed him to hear that it was a real ask and not a suggestion. He went because Micah had been in the room in Los Angeles, and Kenneth had not been able to stop thinking about what Micah had seen. He went because he was 67 years old, and there was still time for the thing that came next to be different from the thing that came before, if he did the work to make it different. He is doing the work. Vera started painting in October, watercolors, which she had wanted to try since she was in her 30s and had never had time for. She is not good at it yet. She does it every Thursday morning at the kitchen table with the light coming in from the east window, and she does not need to be good at it, because the point of it is not the painting. The point of it is the Thursday morning and the east window and the particular quiet of a person doing something for no reason except that she wants to, which is a quiet she is still learning to inhabit without guilt, and is getting better at, week by week, one Thursday at a time. The board still shows 58. That number is permanent. It went into a record that cannot be revised or laughed at or made smaller by someone standing next to it. It is just the number. The true number. The number the room gave her when she told the truth about the quiet work, and the room knew it, and said so, and meant it. The work was never invisible. It just needed a room big enough to say so. If you know someone who has been doing the quiet work for years, keeping everything running, making it look like it runs itself, waiting for someone to notice, send this to them. Right now. Not with a caption. Not with an explanation. Just send it. They've been waiting long enough. Subscribe if you're new, because this is the channel that stops the room for the people the room hasn't stopped for yet. And if you are Vera, if you are standing at the podium right now with the correct answer and someone laughing at it, The board sees you. 58 points. Number 1. Always.